The Terminator, a movie with a perfect blend of sci-fi and horror, leaving us with an eerie warning about what sort of path humanity could be marching towards. Peak 1980s, and some might say, a damn near perfect movie. One that the fans probably wouldn't have minded too much if it didn't get a sequel. However, James Cameron wasn't quite done with the story. I mean, kinda. He was content with The Terminator being a standalone movie, but because it made a decent amount at the box office, he decided that when the time was right, he would make a sequel. And eventually, we got Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Without a doubt, the greatest action movie to ever exist. With a story that tugs at your heartstrings and makes you realize that the future is in fact not set.
There is no fate but what we make for ourselves.
A perfect ending to such a great story. At least, that's what the fans thought. The studio who produced T2, on the other hand, had some different ideas. And thus, Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines was released to the public.
I'm back.
Now, originally, James Cameron was actually supposed to direct the movie. Unfortunately though, because the production company decided to go behind Cameron's back to obtain the rights to the Terminator, he ended up wanting nothing to do with it. However, he would go on to give Arnold Schwarzenegger his blessing to star in the film, because Schwarzenegger actually said he wouldn't do it without Cameron being involved.
Run!
And even though it made a shit ton of money, most fans called it the worst thing to happen to the Terminator franchise since James Cameron sold the rights of the movie to his soon-to-be ex-wife for a single dollar.
Whoops.
I mean, you can't really blame the fans. This had been the first Terminator movie since 1991, and it almost followed the exact same story, but with a different ending, and no Sarah Connor.
You're dead, honey.
Although, with a budget of roughly $170 million, the movie did go on to make a little over $400 million, giving the producers the idea that people did want more Terminator, even if they thought the movie and story kinda sucked. Now with an intro like that, you might think that I too hate this movie. And if you had asked me maybe 10 years ago, I probably would have said yes. But nowadays, after a few rewatches, I wouldn't really say that I do. Sure, I think that what's canon to the story is only what happened in the first two movies, but I still think that Terminator 3 is a fun watch. That has some interesting parts to it. You know, a quick fun fact about me is I actually used to watch the Terminator films anytime they were on TV when I was a kid. Without my parents knowing, of course. The problem was that they only ever aired Terminator 2 and Terminator 3 back to back. So in my little kid brain, I just assumed that the second Terminator was actually the first movie, and that Terminator 3 was actually the second movie. So I never really understood why people always said that Terminator 2 was better. At least that was until I found a DVD copy of the first Terminator at my Aunt and Uncle's house and watched it in the middle of the night. Then the pieces all started to line up. Anyway, there are parts of T3 that I actually do kinda like. I mean, sure, it's almost an exact copy of Terminator 2, with some shitty jokes thrown in and a more depressing ending, I guess.
Talk to the hand.
But there are some fascinating pieces. The introduction of Catherine Brewster was a fun expansion to the story, and I think that Claire Danes actually does a real good job with the character. It was actually kind of refreshing watching a movie where the bad guy wins, and it doesn't completely shit on the legacy of the past movies. I'm looking at you, Dark Fate. And I think it's really cool getting to see what an adult John Connor might be like if the war didn't happen. At least, when it was supposed to. That's another thing. Nick Stahl playing John Connor. Originally, Edward Furlong was actually supposed to come back and play the role. But because the man couldn't say no to nose candy, he lost the part, and Nick Stahl would go on to take over.
No sign of brain trauma.
When this movie came out, he was essentially given the same treatment by the fans as Hayden Christensen got for starring in the prequels by Star Wars fans. A lot of people hated him for taking up this role, and honestly, I can't figure out why.
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks.
I think he does a great job with what he's given. I mean, sure, he definitely doesn't look like a grown-up version of Edward Furlong, but then again, does this guy really look like a grown-up version of Edward Furlong? So even though he doesn't necessarily look the same, I could totally believe him as like a 20-year-old John Connor. Truthfully, I wouldn't have minded seeing him return for Terminator Salvation. But with the initial fan response and the fact that Salvation was just an all-around mess to make. I'm sure he's happy that this part of his life is far behind him.
I've erased all connections to the past.
I also think that we got a really good version of the main Terminator theme in this movie. But I only wish that they played it at the beginning credits rather than strictly at the end credits. One thing I'm still not sure of is the TX. It just seems like some writer said, what if the T-1000 could actually form into complex weapons, and was a woman? Now, I'm not a female Terminator. For something that's classified as an infiltration unit, I actually think a female version is brilliant. But let's be honest, they weren't thinking about it like that. We all know why they wanted to make the Terminator a female. This was the early 2000s after all. I also don't really like the message it tries to give at the end, which is essentially that your path in life is already set. What's going to happen will always have to happen, and nothing you do can change that.
Damn it!
I personally don't believe that. I think that if your life is going in a direction you don't really like, you can change it. You know, if you're willing to put in the work. But we're not here to talk about philosophy, so let's move on. Like I said before, I don't really hate this movie. It doesn't totally bastardize the lore like future sequels would. Yeah, it sucks that Sarah Connor died, but I mean...
She'll be back.
Hamilton was supposed to reprise her role for this movie, but she didn't like her character arc in the script. And once James Cameron dropped, there was just no way she would star. So kudos to the folks in charge, I guess, for not recasting her character. I could have done without the cheesy jokes that they threw in there, though. Especially the spoof they did on the bar scene from Terminator 2, by this time having Arnold go into a strip club on ladies' night in order to get his clothes off of a stripper. There was just so much potential for this movie. Like, this could have been the movie where we saw two T-800s duke it out. And I know there are quite a few fans that got excited when the Genesis trailer showed 1984 Arnold fighting 2017 Arnold. If they wanted to try something new, this could have been the movie that showed the situations leading up to the final battle against Skynet. We could have seen John Connor actually send back Kyle in the T-800. Hell, if you wanted to throw in a little sequel bait, you could have shown him sending a third Terminator back only to give the date that it'll be sent back to. Essentially, do more of what Terminator Salvation did.
Hey!
But instead, the writers took the safe bet, following a formula, somewhat, that was already successful and ensuring that they could continue making sequels if the movie was a success. Which it was, financially speaking. And that's why we have many more terrible sequels to go over. And I do plan on going each and every one of them like this. Eventually.
Fuck.
Well, I think that's all I have to say about that. Just want to say thank you very much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts of Terminator 3 are in the comments. I always like to see what the many different opinions of the fans are of the series. That's about it. So with that, I'll see you in the next one.